Hi there, I'm Jennifer Eskridge, the Community Outreach Educator for the Oregon Poison Center. 2021 marks Mr. Yuck's 50th birthday, and today we're taking some time to reflect on his impact across the country. I have with me Sandy Giffin, the former director of the Oregon Poison Center, who's worked in this area for 30 years. Thanks for joining us, Sandy. Before we get into some questions about Mr. Yuck, can you tell us a little about your history with the Oregon Poison Center?
Sure. First of all, I'd like to wish Mr. Yuck a happy birthday. And actually, my familiarity with Mr. Yuck predated my starting at the Poison Center. I started my professional career as a pediatric nurse in a children's hospital up in Washington. And that hospital had a small poison center, which basically was a closet with microfiche, and they used Mr. Yuck. So I was familiar as a nurse of using Mr. Yuck and talking to young kids about poison prevention. And I worked there for a dozen years, and then I came down to the Oregon Poison Center to take a management job at the Poison Center. And that's when I realized that the Oregon Poison Center also had used Mr. Yuck for many, many years. So it had been definitely ingrained in all the education programs of the Oregon Poison Center for quite a few years.
Excellent. So you were around in the early days when poison centers were first using Mr. Yuck as a symbol for poison prevention. What do you remember about Mr. Yuck when Oregon first started using him?
Well, we used the Mr. Yuck stickers, and we had a collaboration with a pharmacy chain in the state who distributed the stickers for us, which made it easier for us to distribute stickers in some of the parts of the state that aren't close to Portland, where the Poison Center is located. And they helped offset the cost of the Mr. Yuck stickers. And they figured it was a win-win because it encouraged people to come into their stores to pick up the Mr. Yuck stickers and then do some other shopping. So we use that chain to do distribution and really had Mr. Yuck incorporated in all parts of the state, even in the rural areas. We also used it at the Poison Center when we went out to give presentations to young children and parents. We talked about Mr. Yuck and distributed the stickers. I think in the early days, the thought was you take stickers and put them in all substances that are poisonous in the home. And it really became apparent that that wasn't really going to be practical. But it was very helpful to know that if children recognize Mr. Yuck, it means somebody has spoken to them about poison prevention. And we still today find a lot of parents who were familiar with Mr. Yuck when they were growing up and want to use that with their young children to talk about poison prevention. So we used it in a lot of different educational things. We used the logo on a lot of our educational materials. Now we have some other logos available to us, the Poison Help, which can be probably easier to utilize with adults, not pediatric poisoning, but we still have found that there is a lot of people that really like the Mr. Yuck sticker, so have continued to use that.
Absolutely. It's so fun to see people come up to our booths at events and see the stickers and get excited about the fact that Mr. Yuck is still around and something that we use with kids today.
I wanted to make mention that we had a life-size costume of Mr. Yuck, and actually it was developed by pharmacy students down at Oregon State University as a teaching tool, and part of their program down there required them to go do educational poison prevention education in their community. And it wasn't necessarily a formal relationship with the Poison Center, but they had this Mr. Yuck costume made and they used it to take out to different community events. And then years later, when those students came up and spent time in the Poison Center and we had them do other educational events, they brought the costume up. So our Poison Center had that costume for quite some time. And it had two armholes sticking out of the side. And it was a huge costume, so large that it wouldn't fit in a van. So transporting became somewhat challenging because you had to put it in the back of a pickup truck. But it has been so effective with kids, and we really enjoyed using that. So years ago, we had a promotional campaign with the Portland Trail Blazers, which is Portland's NBA franchise. And in the 80s, we had two players that were beloved. One was Kevin Duckworth, and the other was Buck Williams. And in collaboration with the retail pharmacy group in our state, we were able to collaborate with the Portland Trail Blazers in doing a promotional campaign that featured Duck and Buck Say Yuck. And it had the costume of Mr. Yuck. And that was really popular. We had the opportunity to go to halftime at one of the games to promote Mr. Yuck, and had a booth at the basketball game. And that was just really fun, very fun.
Absolutely. And what a great way to get the community engaged in what we do.
Yes.
Do you have any fun memories of the public responding to the costume when you were out at events?
Yes. One of the things that we used to do, we went to the state capitol and had somebody, we always had the students wear the costume, because I felt that one of the things in my job description is I shouldn't have to wear the costume, but I could take students around. And they just love to do that, because you're like a different persona when you're wearing this costume, and young children would run up and hug Mr. Yuck's legs. So I remember going to our state capitol, and we were recognizing Poison Prevention Week, and had the opportunity to go on the floor of the house with Mr. Yuck, which seemed to be a great privilege. And also around campus, when we've had somebody wear the costume and walk around, it's so larger than life that people just loved it. And people really recognized who Mr. Yuck was. I also remember one of the alternative newspapers here in Portland is called the Willamette Week. And I remember receiving a call from their music reviewer, and he wanted to use the Mr. Yuck logo for music that he was panning in terms of their music reviews. Now, clearly that is a violation of what the intent of Mr. Yuck was, and we always had to be pretty protective of how the Mr. Yuck image is used. But I thought what it represented is, here was this music reviewer of, an adult, was so familiar with Mr. Yuck and wanted to utilize it. So I think that's reflective of just the number of people that are familiar with Mr. Yuck. Really shows how effective that image has been as a tool through generations now.
Absolutely. It's such a testament.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, do you have any other favorite memories of Mr. Yuck that you'd like to share?
Well, we had a poster contest. I think a lot of poison centers have. And in the early days, a lot of the poster contests were surrounding use of Mr. Yuck. And we had so many very creative posters over the years of Mr. Yuck. Some of them replicating famous artists, famous painters, like Salvador Dali with a slumped Mr. Yuck. Now, obviously, whatever student it was that submitted that poster, probably their parents were artists or art teachers or something. So I think they had a little help, but very creative. And that had always been a real fun event too.
That's so great. And this year, again, a poster contest is happening nationally, as well as a video contest for older kids. So we continue to see that creativity come to life and spread the message of Mr. Yuck. Sandy, thanks so much for coming back and talking with us. We love hearing about your memories of Mr. Yuck and all the ways you got to be involved in sharing this message about poison prevention. And
Mr. Yuck has always been a great opportunity for us, and it actually opened the door to allow us to go to talk to parents and young children about poison prevention, because he's been a somewhat beloved figure and certainly well recognized. So I I would once again like to honor Mr. Yuck on his birthday, and he's served us well in the Poison Center world.
Agreed. Happy birthday, Mr. Yuck.